So Scott Braddock has a great article in Salon called "How Do They Sleep at Night?" And this is a classic story about publican hypocrisy. Did I say Republican hypocrisy? If you're alive, if your senses work, and if you've ever heard a Republican anywhere say anything about economic policy, you know they're for what they call small government, which this argument about small government versus big government is a stupid argument. Pretty much just as stupid, and I guess it actually is parallel to the Republican versus Democrat argument. I mean, if you want to talk about it ideologically, small government versus big government, yeah, I mean, it just depends on what it is the government's doing in any particular case and how big it is and how small it is. It's just one of those stupid devices that politicians try to use to get us, to divide us so that they can conquer us, right? This apparently is the brilliant idea that the Texas governor, Rick Perry, has bought into. He was also a former presidential candidate, if you recall, when he blocked legislation concerning what Braddock refers to as worker misclassification. Now, which I'm familiar with, but blocked legislation. In this article, it's not clear that that's exactly what he did, but so we're just gonna, I guess, infer a little bit. But nevertheless, let's get into the details of the story, and you'll see how he's a fucking prick anyway. Now, I was interested in this story because, as I said, I've had experience with worker misclassification. Several times I've been a victim of it. Now, what does it mean? Let me explain. So, when you work for a company every day, right? As a barista, I think what is the largest employer in the country, Walmart. You come into work every day, you answer to a boss, you do your job, and then when the day's over, you go home. Right? There are certain taxes that the employer has to pay to have you on as an employee, right? They have to pay workers' comp, they have to pay health benefits, there's safety training, overtime, the details of which vary from state to state, but generally speaking, these things all amount to costs to the employer, not just in time, but in an actual money that they have to pay in taxes. Now, one of the things Republicans and people in corporations always do is fail to see the long-term benefit of providing workers with things like workers' comp, health benefits, job training, etc. Because what it means is your workers are less motivated and there's more turnover, and you end up wasting a bunch of time training a bunch of new people and whatnot. But as I said, those people aren't interested in long-term. I mean, maybe if you're the founder of a company and you really care about the company that you founded, you might care about the longevity of it, and you might recognize these principles as beneficial to your company. But if you're the CEO of some company and you didn't build it, and you stack the board full of your friends that give you and themselves raises at the expense of... Okay, stop. Let's get into the details of the story, okay? So worker mischaracterization is when a company uses people like employees, but they classify you as an independent contractor, right? And then after the year's over, they file a 1099 on you, and essentially what a 1099 is it's just a record of how much money they paid you, but there aren't any taxes taken out, right? Braddock explains that the situation in Texas, right? He's talking specifically in this case about the construction industry, which is some of the hardest labor that there is, right? Roofing, shoveling, laying stone, and bricks, drywall, masonry, which I guess is laying stone. I think I recall that roofing is like the number one most dangerous job in the entire country, right? So I'm just going to quote from him here. And actually, on that issue of roofing, before I go to that quote, he uses a particular person in this article, as a device to sort of point out the actual human costs of what's going on here. And it's a guy named Miguel. He didn't use his last name, but he's a dude who is working as one of these independent subcontractors, and he fell off a roof. and he's fucked because he doesn't have workers' comp, he doesn't have insurance, he's just responsible for himself, and not only were they paying him under minimum wage because if you're an independent contractor, you don't have to pay the employees minimum wage. You're not bound by that because they're technically their own bosses, right? So yeah, he can't pay his medical bills. He's fucked, right? So here, let's get into the details, right? Quote: not only do these workers lack health insurance, in Texas, workers' comp is optional. It's just this is another great thing that Texas is doing for their workers. They're also not paid by the hour, don't receive overtime pay, lack safety training, which I've talked about, and of course, get no retirement plan. If you venture out to one of the many subdivisions being built just about anywhere in Texas, you'll see row upon row of houses under construction. The workers, mainly Latinos, are one serious injury away from needing the volunteers of the Living Hope Wheelchair Association or other faith-based groups. So what he's talking about there is that there are these specific groups that are dedicated. I don't know what a large percentage of what they do goes toward helping these specific people that get injured on jobs or have other job-related problems that and lack insurance, right? And so he goes on, they're toiling in the hot Texas sun with no safety net, well, except for the Living Hope Wheelchair Association, etc., right? If they're hurt, they'll be patched up at the emergency room. Their employer will not get the bill. You and I will pick up the tab through our property taxes. Socialized medicine at its best, I suppose, is how he ends the quote. Now, that is the core of Republican ideology, right? Not the fake ideology where they pretend like the benefits trickle down if you cut taxes and the market evens itself out if you remove regulations, that kind of pure capitalism that libertarians advocate. The real ideology does include cutting taxes and nixing regulations, but the purpose isn't to uplift society. It's to line their own pockets by crushing the little guy, to use a cliche, right? This is exactly what this practice of worker mischaracterization does. And now I'll tell you about my experience with worker mischaracterization because I can't resist. And this is why I can't resist doing this story, because I was a victim of this, as I said. I hesitate to use that word. I don't like calling myself a victim. It makes me feel kind of slimy, but let me just explain here. I worked as a medical transport, I want to say employee. Employee is not the right term. I worked it's just medical transport is just another euphemism for cab driver, right? I was a cab driver, drove people to their doctor's appointments. When the company I worked for hired me, they didn't give me an option to get hired as an employee, right? They said all their workers were private contractors. And I thought, well, that's strange. I didn't really know the difference. I was just desperate to get a job. I used to work for a research and development firm, but when the economy tanked, thanks to these sort of principles that are fucking workers over in Texas, the investors that provided us the money that we needed to run our company decided they were going to cut the funding, right? So when I got hired at this company, he said it wasn't hourly, rather it was piecework, right? I'd worked piecework before, and it was awesome money because generally speaking, if you work harder and you're doing piecework, you can make more per hour because you get paid by the job you do. So you work harder, you work faster, you work smarter, you get more jobs done, and you make more. And, that's actually, I really enjoy that kind of work because as long as there's work available to do, as long as you don't run out of work, right? Because it gets your employer off your ass because they know that you're self-motivated, right? And you're not going to be milking the clock, and it also affords you an opportunity to make more money. And if you have a strong work ethic, you'll get rewarded for it. So I actually like piecework personally, but what I didn't know with this new job, this medical transport job, that they were going to giving me a 1099. So you can do piecework and still be an employee. So they still take the money out of your check. You still get the workers' comp and the job training and all that stuff, right? In overtime, right? But so when he said piecework, I was like, all right, well, it's just going to be the same as the other job, and I didn't really look into it. Yeah, unwise. Yeah, I understand that. But, I've always worked as an employee, so I didn't, it's a form of ignorance that comes from, a lack of, personal experience. Sometimes you need the experience to actually teach you something. You can't know everything before it actually happens to you in your life. Yeah. I criticize other people for, doing that kind of thing, for, not having a lack or having a lack of imagination. But hey, it happens to I wanted to say the best of us, but I don't want to call myself the best, so I won't phrase it that way. I'll just move on. So this job, I showed up for work every day. I drove people around, but I had to pay for my own gas. I had to use my own vehicle. And it didn't matter how much I worked because I got paid for the mileage, and I only got a certain number of contracts per day that they gave me. It's not like, here, let me finish this job and then move on to the next job. It was just like, well, here's your jobs for the day, and that's all you get. So I didn't get workers' comp, didn't get healthcare, didn't get overtime. I didn't even get paid wait time, right, while I was waiting for the customers to finish their appointments and stuff. That stuff all sucks. Clearly, and I was getting paid less than minimum wage, by the way, when I first started, because this company, it also happens, was fraught with nepotism, and everybody that worked there was were friends with the three guys who were the sons, who ran the company, who were the sons of the guy who owned it. But the real sort of splintered chair leg in my ass was the self-employment tax, which I hadn't anticipated. So I got my 1099, and then I was like, "What the fuck is this?" I have to, I used a CPA. I sent it to my CPA because I actually did end up making a lot of money because 4 people quit the company, and they gave me all the good contracts after that because they had no other choice, right? So I ended up getting lucky on that count. So I sent it to the CPA, and then he showed me how much tax I had to pay, and the self-employment tax amounts to 10 to 12% extra on top of the income tax, Social Security tax, and all the other shit that you have to pay. So, for example, even if you're in the 15% tax bracket, if you have a self-employment tax, you don't make any more actual income. You don't have any more revenue. You're still, make enough revenue to be in that 15% tax bracket, but they dump an extra 10% tax on you. So you're making the amount that, puts you in the 15% bracket, but you're paying 25% in taxes. That is massive. And for me that year, it ended up being about an extra $3,800 out of my pocket. That sucked. That hurt so bad when that happened. And in fact, I almost defaulted on a bunch of, I'm paying back student loans and stuff like that. Man, it sucked so bad. So yeah, working as an independent subcontractor sucks balls. Meanwhile, all the company has to do is pay you the wage, right? Whatever that is. They just, they get the contracts. They give you a percentage of it for doing the job. You're responsible for paying all of your, medical bills and, taxes and whatnot. And they get off scot-free. They have their own taxes as the company, but they get off without paying any of those taxes that are associated with employing people, right? So Braddock in the article explains the story of the worker who fell off the roof, right, which I told you about before. He was his own boss, and according to the company that he worked for, right? So the first point you recall is that some of these costs end up getting picked up by the taxpayer. It's socialism, right? But here's the thing. It's massively inefficient, right? Because instead of being an actual, socialist program, like, say, Social Security or Medicare or something, where, you can look at it, and it's, I don't have the evidence here, I didn't look it up, but I accept it is true. Yeah, this is very credible. It's an Uncredible Show. That things like Social Security and in fact, I made another video about this. You could actually go back and check it where I did talk about this. But these liberal policies like Social Security and Medicare actually save us money, right? But when these people have to go to the emergency room, for example, if they get injured, and it's not an actual social program, and it's just like emergency services, where people have to they don't get paid very much, or they get injured and they lose their job, and then they have to go on welfare. That's massively inefficient. It's much better for the economy if these people have this protection as workers, and they can keep contributing to production, and then making higher wages, and using those wages to buy things that stimulate the economy, right? So Republicans talk so big, right? Socialism. Obama's a socialist. It's like it's a cursed word, right? It's like has a magic power behind it for them. Like, it's as bad as communism used to be in the during the Cold War. At the same time, they brag about how they care so much about the budget. Like, it's what they use to people whenever they're caught spying on us, like with this NSA stuff, or infringing on our civil liberties in some way. Their excuse is always, terrorism or national security. Well, when it comes to these economic policies, the Republicans, their magic word for that is the budget. Oh, we had to cut Social Security because of the budget. We have to balance the budget. Did you know that the last time a Republican balanced the budget was Eisenhower? He was the last one to do it. Yeah, Republicans never balance the budget. So this policy of worker mischaracterization, it leads to massive and gross, inefficient socialism, right? It's like you get the and then they turn around and they point to socialism and see, it doesn't work, but it's their fucked up kind of socialism that that they cause by screwing over workers in the first place, that is massively inefficient. So they don't give a fuck about the workers or the budget. The whole practice is about sucking the cash out of the middle class, right? In the short term. But Braddock makes another really important point, right? And this is another contradiction of the conservative ideology. He says, quote, "Not only is it terrible for the workers, but misclassification puts companies who play by the rules at a serious competitive disadvantage. Make no mistake, there are rules governing this abuse. It is already illegal to intentionally misclassify your workers. The problem, in Texas at least, is that there is no penalty for it. If a company is caught misclassifying workers, it must pay back taxes and sometimes overtime pay it would have owed anyway, but there are no fines. Sort of like if you got a speeding ticket, but you didn't owe anything for it. Enforcement on construction sites, especially in the residential sector, is almost non-existent. Those companies hire lobbyists to make certain this doesn't change. But now they've got a real fight on their hands, right? So we'll get into that in a little bit in a second. What this fight on their hands is, but first, just a little bit of commentary. Remember, Rick Perry is an executive, right? If these laws are not getting enforced, it's his responsibility as the governor. Now, if there isn't any fine for violating these laws they have about worker misclassification, it kind of takes the teeth completely out of the law. And like the worst thing that can happen to them is that they end up having to pay those back taxes and end up having owing overtime fees and things like that. So, I mean, first of all, there's no incentive for them to follow the rules in the first place because they might end up getting away with it. But Rick Perry, as the executive, like, Jesus Christ, throw us a fucking bone here. At least enforce, on these people so they have to, pay the back taxes and the overtime and stuff. I mean, come on. But this is another thing the Republicans do, right? So the article points out that the companies who cheat by not classifying their workers properly can bid 25% lower than the ones following the rules. That is exactly what the Republicans are about, not just in this market, but in all markets across the board. I mean, that's the core of their ideology, right? It's not a free market. The companies that donated to Rick Perry rigged the game so that they have this massive advantage, this 25% advantage over the companies that would follow the rules. And it's all at the cost of the workers and the smaller companies. Now, if you know anything about politics, you know that the big home building companies were the ones who were against any of these regulations. And they were against it to the tune of, and the article points out, $18.4 million donated to the Texas politicians, including $2.1 million who went to Governor Rick Perry himself. Now, if you're a home building company and you donate $2.1 million to Governor Rick Perry, the guy who's ultimately responsible for enforcing these worker misclassification laws, wouldn't you expect that he'd give you something in return? I mean, you give him $2.1 million because you think that, you enjoy the way that you enjoyed his ads when you saw him, on TV. You think he'd do, a decent job, as governor across the board. No, you want something in return for the $2.1 million. So a guy named Michael White, and now we're getting back into the fight on their hands that these the big home building companies have, right? A guy named Michael White and then several business owners testified that payroll fraud is a cancer, and payroll fraud is a term that they're using for worker misclassification. And the members of the Workforce Commission in Texas voted unanimously to support penalties for companies engaging in this practice on government contracts. So what that would do is give the teeth back to these laws. So not only do you have to pay the back taxes and overtime, etc., but you also have to pay a fee for violating the rules in the first place. That makes it a lot. That sort of incentivizes them to actually follow the law, right? So Braddock explains this unanimous vote from the Workforce Commission grabbed the attention of the powerful chairman of the Texas Senate's Business and Commerce Committee. The guy's name is Senator John Corona. Delicious name. Who said, winners don't cheat, and the cheater's day is over. So clearly, this guy is in favor. Senator John Corona is in favor of this unanimous vote to institute the fines for violating these laws. He says, quote, "I will be working with stakeholders, using what we've learned in many other states to close the loopholes and restore fair competition to the construction industry." And that's exactly what he tried to do, to his credit. And so this guy, on the other hand, is a smart dude, right? And this is what the Republicans always get wrong. By the way, this guy is a Republican, so he is sort of going against the grain. What do Republicans always say? When we talk about, we need to look at other states, or we need to look, perhaps even, look at Europe to see what they're doing in terms of their education, in terms of their, whatever the policy is. They always say, we're number one, we're always right, they're always wrong, and we're just going to keep doing whatever the fuck we want. Now, that's all just a bunch of bullshit rhetoric. The reality is that they just want the money. So it's rare to see a Republican come out in favor of looking at other states to see how they do it, much less like trying to close loopholes and actually restore fair competition, right? So as I said, he's a Republican, and he actually came out with a bill to accomplish these things. He made it somewhat reasonable, right? It basically defined a little bit better how you can classify subcontractors, and it instituted the penalties that he talked about for breaking the laws. Now, there were still loopholes, so, he is a Republican at his core. There are still loopholes where they could get out of paying the fines. No shocker there, right? But at least, he did something. And it was enough that all the smaller companies ended up in support of the bill, right? And those are the kind of companies where like the bosses tend to have more personal relationships with the employees. They're on the ground every day with the employees. Like they actually realize that they're human beings. So it's not a surprise that the smaller companies would be more likely to come out in support of the bill. And by the way, they also can't afford to bribe Rick Perry. So after all this work on Corona's part on this bill, he gets it. It goes to a committee, and it gets unanimously approved to go to the Senate. So there's also another part of the story where actually the small businesses were against the bill at first, and then Corona actually, he showed him what was actually in it, and he sort of convinced them, and he turned them around on it, and they're like, oh yeah, that's actually really good. So the bill goes to the House for debate, right? But as the article explains, there's this thing called the House Calendars Committee, which, like it sounds, is basically just a group that sets dates when debates over bills happen in the actual House. So what happens? Well, this calendar committee has this completely idiotic ability where they can just not assign a day for the debate, right? So, it goes to the committee, it gets passed, and then they can just be like, oh, that's interesting, and then they just throw it in the round file, right? And that's exactly what those motherfuckers did. So, after years, and this went on years, right? This, trying to get this bill, correct through the committee. So after years of fighting on this, cajoling and convincing, and balancing on, what would please the companies but still be fair to the workers, all of which at the end, the vast majority of workers and smaller companies supported, the bill dies without a debate because the calendars committee never scheduled it. They're just like, oops, we forgot to write it down. So I guess it's just gone. It's so frustrating. Where are you, Rick Perry? I mean, is it you didn't show up to this, in support of this bill, and you don't enforce these laws on these, companies to get them to, at the very least, pay the back taxes that they owe for this misclassification, right? I mean, is it because you're lazy and you don't feel like enforcing, the fines and whatnot? Or, sorry, it's not even fines. You don't feel like enforcing the laws. Is it do you not care about your constituents? I mean, why the fuck did they elect you if you're going to be, this bill that has almost unanimous support, goes through this huge process and it's ready for debate, and then you just, you go silent. Why did they, what the hell are you doing? Why are you the governor? I'm not even going to get into the stuff that he actually does actively, do and advocate, because that's too sickening. It wasn't me. It was the committee. It went to the committee, and they decided that for whatever reason, it's just a coincidence that the largest companies got exactly what they wanted again. How about some fucking leadership, Rick Perry? Well, to use the phrase again, if you've been paying attention, you know that Rick Perry is a corporatist shill of the highest order, as is evidenced in these events, right? Fixing the market so that the companies who cheat can benefit, and shifting the burden onto the people who do the back-breaking work for those companies. That's Republican 101. If Republicans tell you they are for the free market, remember what the free market actually means to these people. It means unbridled greed. And we know when that happens, we know from the 2008 crash that when you give companies the ability to pursue their unbridled greed, we're the ones who get fucked. And it's not just evil, right? It's what I talked about before. It's incredibly stupid. If you keep crushing people and crushing them, who do you think you're going to sell these houses to that you're building, right? What are you going to do when the middle class collapses and it's not there to protect you anymore, right? I'm trying to go out and get laid tonight, so I don't have time to try to prove why the middle class is so important for the whole society. I mean, I did that in a different show. So in this context, my unsupported assertion is that generally the middle class provides you the kind of society that allows you, Rick Perry, to become the rich bastard that you are. Without where you don't have to worry about farming your own food, or riding a horse to the post office, or you actually do like to ride horses. I mean, I've seen your fucking ads. Please, what kind of car do you drive? Is it Cadillacs like Mitt Romney did? Consumer capitalism. You know what? I'm gonna go to Peep Show. David Mitchell's character on Peep Show. He said, I'm trying to remember it here. I think I can remember it verbatim. It is consumer capitalism is the miracle that keeps you from lying in your own shit, dying at in your 40s from rotten teeth. The middle class made you, Rick Perry, and you should be down on your fucking knees thanking us for your mansion, right? But that's not what they do. I mean, they just take advantage of what the middle class built, and then shit all over the middle class, take the money and run. Thanks. We appreciate it. We're so glad that we elected you, and thanks for that. Controlling all of the textbooks that get manufactured and printed in Texas that go out to the rest of the country that have all the anti-science bullshit in them too. Thanks for that as well. We really appreciate that shit. Which is also gonna, ruining society, just like fucking the middle classes. It's like these people, like, do you want to live in a mansion with a moat, in the middle of the woods somewhere, and like the whole society around you is just a shithole where people are riddled with disease and the infrastructure's crumbling, and everybody's packing heat. I mean, I heard Steve-O talk about this on the Young Turks the other day. Wouldn't having all of your money be so much more enjoyable if the place that you lived is maintained properly and the citizens you're charged with protecting are not going to fucking mug you because you fucked them with a splintered chair leg so bad that they can't even live, right? They can't get, their teeth are going to rot out, and then maybe they are going to die at 43. And if they don't, they're going to have to go to the emergency room, and we're going to have to pick up the cost, and it's going to be inefficient socialism. The thing that you always talk about is so terrible. Now, you're just a spoiled child who had everything. I never thought once where it came from. Now, I'm not talking about just Rick Perry, and I'm not necessarily talking about when he was a child, he was actually spoiled. I'm assuming that if he's the governor of a state in this country, that he probably was actually a spoiled child because you need money to get elected, and the easiest way to get that money to get elected is to come from money. But so I'm just going to assume that he was rich. I'm not talking about he's literally a spoiled child, though, even though he probably is. I'm talking about the people who advocate these kinds of policies that extract the wealth from the middle class and don't want to pay, a higher tax. I mean, paying a higher tax should be the cost of living in a society that allows you to get filthy, stinking rich, right? I mean, you're just a spoiled. And if you don't want to pay those higher taxes and you want to shift the burden on to the middle class that built you, that made you, you're just a fucking spoiled child. All you Republicans who advocate that. And you never think about where it came from. You never acknowledge that we allow you to exist. And, as Hitchens said of Jerry Falwell, and, this is probably going a bit too far, but, when Rick Perry does stuff like this, maybe I won't say it. All right, I'll just tell you what Hitchens said about Falwell, and I specifically won't say it necessarily about Rick Perry. He said, "It's a pity there isn't a hell for you to go to." Too harsh. Yes, I understand. I denounce myself. Is it too harsh? Maybe I'm not sure. I don't think anyone, no matter how heinous, deserves eternal torture. So yeah, it would be too harsh. But I mean, I guess that's another difference between us, right? Because you're a fundamentalist, right? You think I'm going to hell. I might not say it. You would hem and haw if I asked you to your face. But yeah, I mean, you talked about Jesus constantly. I mean, that could be a whole different show. Me talking about all the different crazy fundamentalist stuff you said. Okay, I need to get laid tonight. After this story making me really angry. And I'll be thinking of you, Rick. All right, peace, all y'all.